Welcome back to the channel, and thank you for watching, and thank you for smashing that like button on the way in, by the way. So in this video I'm going to ask you, do you remember my other video when Amber was talking about victims in the third person, which I suggested, in my opinion, in that video might mean that she was admitting that actually she wasn't a victim after all, because of the way she spoke about it, put them in the third person. Well, here's a very interesting thing. I'm going to show you the clip from that original portion that I dissected for you, and then a portion out of what was supposed to be the full and final interview, which was aired on Dateline. I'm going to play to you the two clips side by side so you can see the difference. Here's the first clip, how it first aired as one of the initial shorter portions of this interview. Listen very carefully to what she says here. She's talking about the audio recordings where she can be heard admitting to starting physical fights. Listen to the wording very carefully.
When your life is at risk, not only will you take the blame for things that you shouldn't take the blame for, but when you're in an abusive dynamic, psychologically, emotionally, and physically, you don't have the resources that, say, you or I do with the luxury of saying, hey, this is black and white, because it's anything but.
So she says when you're in that kind of relationship, you don't have the kind of resources that, say, you or I do. So speaking of victims in the third person, now compare it to how it aired in the so-called final interview.
But I am looking at a transcript that says, he says, you start physical fights, and you say, I did start a physical fight.
I did start a physical fight.
Yeah, you did.
But you're just telling me today, I never started a physical fight, and here you are on tape saying you did.
As I testified on the stand about this, is that when your life is at risk, not only will you take the blame for things that you shouldn't take the blame for, but when you're in an abusive dynamic, psychologically, emotionally, and physically, you don't have the luxury of saying, hey, this is black and white, because it's anything but when you're living in it.
She says when you're in that kind of relationship, you don't have the luxury of saying that's black and white. But that's not what she said in the first clip that was aired. So that's not what she said in the interview. So this supposed full interview is not, in my opinion, the full interview, assuming that the first clip that they released a few days before was how she said it when she was asked the question, which I would assume so, because that's how it was played when they played that first clip. But it's not how she said it in what they call the final interview. In my opinion, that's somewhat dishonest, because it's not what she said. They are portraying an interview where they have edited it very carefully to change her response to the question. It's changed the meaning of her response to the question. And her response isn't the same, in fact, as what she said in the first time round. Again, assuming that the first time it was aired was accurate, and we'd have no reason to believe otherwise. In fact, more reason to believe that once it's been aired and some comments like mine on my videos where I've picked apart certain bits of what's been said, perhaps someone is reviewing what I'm saying and what other law tubers and other commentators such as Andy Signor are saying. Big thanks, by the way, to Andy Signor and Popcorn Planet. So many of you have come over from Andy's channel, and I'm really grateful to you all for doing that, and I'm really grateful for Andy to push you over here. Make sure you sign his petition for Lisa's birthday episode of The Simpsons. Make sure you look up that. I'll put it in the description below. Make sure you go and sign his petition. So if all of us commentators are pulling the same thoughts together, then anybody watching that interview could pull the same thoughts together. So maybe, just maybe, there were portions of this interview released ahead of time to test the response, to interest viewers like me, like you perhaps, to see what response there is, but then edit the final version before it aired for everybody to see in, I'll say, its entirety, but it's not its entirety, because it's not the entire interview, clearly. Clearly it's been edited. Clearly it's not just been edited to shorten it, in my opinion. It's been edited to change the meaning and change the response to the questions. So that's disingenuous, in my view. It's giving you a false impression, a different impression, a wrong impression of what she actually said in response to those questions. Now, one might raise the question, if that's been edited to change the meaning and the response to that question, the obvious question is why? Why change the meaning? Is it because it suggests that by talking about victims in the third person, that she's given the game away? Is it because they want to remove the idea that she's somehow admitted that in fact she wasn't suffering those things, because that might lead to someone looking at perjury charges? Because potentially, if there were an admission that she made all of this up, as against saying out loud that she stands by it, which might be defamatory, by the way, again, but if there were an admission that she'd made it up, that she wasn't a victim, that this was all dishonest and this was all lies, if there were such an admission like that, that might well lead to perjury charges if the authorities were so minded to prosecute. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Many of you have already raised this question before. How could she not be prosecuted? Well, I've given my opinion that there is a possibility of being prosecuted for perjury if the state was so minded to do so, if they felt there was compelling evidence that she'd been dishonest. Perhaps even the editing of this final interview, full interview, I don't like calling it the full interview because it's not the full interview, it's been edited, clearly it's been edited. But if that final version were to bolster the idea that she's been dishonest in her testimony, that might go to support perjury charges. As I say, let me know in the comment section below what you think. Remember to like this video because there is more to dissect. There is more to look at. I hope you find it interesting. Please make sure you subscribe, and thank you for joining me, and thank you for watching.